Today we're going to take a look at the perfect size shrub for any size landscape. Hi, I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings, and a lot of times people will call up and say, I really would love to have a shrub in my landscape or my garden, but they're just too big or they're not big enough or whatever the case may be. And I really think that that's not totally true because today I want to show you 8 different families of shrubs where we can show you small options that are great for patios or even rooftop gardens to large varieties that are good for those of you who are looking to do more of a large landscape project. So let's go ahead and break it down, these 8 varieties, and we're going to try breaking it down into a small, a medium, and a large option for most of these that we're going to look at here today. So we're going to start right off with an evergreen. It's the Thuja, and I know some of you are going right now like, oh, Thuja. Why would she start there? But I want to just show you how there's great options of Thuja for anybody that's looking to plant an evergreen in their garden. We're going to start off with small varieties and work our way to the taller varieties as we're going through. So we're going to start off with the Thuja Tater Tot or Anna's Magic Ball. Both of these are very compact varieties that are hardy in zones 3 to 8. They only get about 2 to 3 foot tall and 2 to 3 foot wide, creating a gorgeous mound. They're perfect for in a planter or just lining a small border or sidewalk. Very compact. They like to grow in full sun to part sun locations, especially with the Anna's Magic Ball. The more sun it gets, the lighter yellow it will be. So the more vivid, intense color comes with more sunshine. Now these are so compact, really, they don't need to be trimmed at any point in the season. They're just nice and tight and really are very low maintenance shrubs. Also too, if you're looking to add some natives into the garden, Thuja are most varieties of Thuja will fit that native check as well. The next one we're going to look at is more of a medium-sized one, and this one's got great foliage as well. This is the Polar Gold. So Polar Gold is hardy in zones 3 to 8, and it gets 12 to 15 foot tall and about 4 to 7 foot wide. So it creates kind of a nice columnar or maybe a cone shape habit. You can trim it too if you want to keep it nice and tight and really pyramid shaped. You can give it a nice little trimming up the sides. But if you want to let it go natural too, it has a very nice natural habit that really doesn't need any trimming done to it. I will say that Thuja, also known as Arborvitae, are not deer resistant shrubs. So if deer do tend to be a problem in your garden, I would not recommend most of the Thuja. Now, the large one we're going to put in today's collection is so cool. It's such a unique one. It is Thuja Sting. If you are looking for something that gets about 15 to 20 foot tall, but is very, very narrow, only about 12 to 18, maybe 24 at its most mature size, inches wide. This is a true, I would say it's a kind of a collector's item for the garden. So it's definitely not the type of arborvitae you'd use if you're looking to create a barrier or a blockage from the neighbor, because they're going to stay very, very narrow, but have these nice upright pointing look. It's definitely something like plant them in 3 or plant them in 5 for a really cool garden design. It kind of adds some of that whimsy fun element into the garden. They too are hardy in zones 3 to 8 and very, very little, if any, which really it doesn't need any trimming, is required for that particular shrub. Now, the biggest that we're going to look at today is the Spring Grove. Spring Grove is a big one, hardy in zones 5 to 8. It gets 25 to 30 foot tall and 12 to 15 foot wide. So if you're looking for an arborvitae that's going to block out your neighbors, this is definitely going to be the one that will check that box. So with its incredible height and it's really wide as well, this is a plant you're going to want to make sure you have enough room to plant it because it's definitely going to need a bigger space to really thrive. It likes to be grown in full sun to part sun. And again, it's a native variety and you can trim it if you want, but if you're really looking to do what it's meant to do, which is block out neighbors, create a border, or just having some nice evergreen privacy in your yard, Spring Grove is a great plant for adding privacy in. The next collection of plants we're going to look at are butterfly bush. And I know when you're thinking butterfly bush, I mean, a lot of us might be thinking of the varieties that maybe are 6 foot tall or so. But that's what's nice about the breeding with butterfly bush is there are so many options now. We're going to start with the smallest in the series that we're going to talk about today, and that is the pugster butterfly bush. These are definitely one of the favorite varieties here at Garden Crossings. They are hardy in zones 5 to 9, and they get 2 foot tall and 2 foot wide. So they form a very nice compact mound with really large flowers. They like to be grown in full sun location, and they do bloom off of the new growth. So you can trim them in the fall or you can trim them in the spring whenever you do your trimming, and you're not going to sacrifice any of your flowers for the summer season. They do attract the butterflies and the pollinators and are so very, very fragrant. They're also deer and rabbit resistant, which is awesome, especially for those of us that deal with those deer browsing in our gardens. The medium-sized butterfly bush is Miss Molly. And of course, I'm picking my favorites. Why would I not, right? I love the gorgeous magenta pink color of Miss Molly. Miss Molly is hardy in zones 5 to 9 and gets about 4 to 5 foot tall and 4 to 5 foot wide. So a little bit taller butterfly bush, certainly taller than the Pugster series. And they are long blooming, as are all butterfly bush. They usually bloom from like midsummer into the fall or your first hard frost. Like the Pugster series, Miss Molly also blooms off of the new growth, so it can be trimmed in the fall or in the spring, whenever you like to do your garden cleanup. One thing to say about butterfly bush is, as the name implies, butterfly bush, they certainly do attract the butterflies. So if you're looking for a great shrub to add into the garden, that's really going to be drawing those butterflies in. Butterfly bush are such a great long blooming option. And the largest in the series is the Grand Cascade. Oh man, I was out in the trial gardens this summer and saw a gorgeous specimen of Grand Cascade, and I was just absolutely in awe in how big and how full that plant was. 4 to 6 foot tall and 6 to 8 foot wide. So it's got a really wide habit. And oh wow, did it have very long blooms on it as well. And walking past it, the fragrance just absolutely made you stop and want to stick around for a while because it was such a beautiful fragrance. Also deer resistant, and of course, attracts the butterflies. We do recommend growing all the butterfly bush in a full sun location. The next variety is Aronia, also known as chokeberry. And this plant is grown not only for its foliage, but also for its beautiful white spring flowers. It's also fragrant. So the first one we're going to look at is more of a compact variety that just is kind of a ground hugger, as the name implies. It's the Aronia ground hug. It's hardy in zones 3 to 9 and gets only about 12 inches or so tall and about 3 foot wide. So definitely gets a little wider than what it does tall. It likes to be grown in full sun to part sun locations. And as I mentioned, it's a late spring bloomer with small white flowers that are definitely visible as you're walking past. Aronia blooms on the old growth. So if trimming is needed, which you really don't have to do trimming on it, but if you should desire to do trimming, we do recommend trimming after it is done blooming in the spring. It does attract the pollinators, especially those early season pollinators, and it's a native shrub variety. Now, if 1 foot is just a little too small for you and you're looking for something a little bit taller, we would recommend the Aronia berryscape. Berryscape is hardy in zones 4 to 9, and it gets 4 to 5 foot tall and 4 to 5 foot wide. So obviously it's much taller and wider. It likes to be planted in full sun to part sun location, and again, blooms in late spring and also blooms off the new growth. So if any trimming does need to be done, again, we recommend doing so after those original blooms appear. Now, they do also get berries later on in the season. So please note, if you do trim off or do any trimming after it's done flowering, you are going to also probably sacrifice those late season berries. So, at some point there's shrubs that just need to be trimmed, and then you have to do it. But really with the berryscape, because we're giving you 2 different size options, pick the size that best fits the area that you're looking to do something with in your garden. The next series is the Forsythia. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with Forsythia, especially when you see those gorgeous yellow blooms in early spring. It's one of those shrubs that really wakes up the spring garden. The smallest in the series is the Forsythia Sugar Baby. All of our Forsythia are hardy in zones 5 to 9 and are deer resistant. So if you're looking for a shrub that the deer are going to leave alone, this is one you can add to that list. Forsythia Sugar Baby is very compact, only 1.5 to about 2 foot tall, and gets about 3 foot wide, forming just a very nice dwarf compact mound. It likes to be planted in full sun to part sun locations. It does bloom off the old growth, so if trimming is needed, you can do so after it's done blooming, although with the size of this one, rarely is trimming ever needed. Forsythia Show-Off Starlet is the medium-sized one, and it gets about 3 foot tall by 3 foot wide. So again, very small, like Sugar Baby, blooming early in the spring. Now, one thing I will say is if you don't do any trimming on your Forsythia and you start to notice that maybe it's just not blooming as much as it originally did, that kind of is a good indicator that it is a good time to go ahead and give it a light trim. Typically, we recommend trimming off maybe the top third or so, and that just kind of rejuvenates some new growth and also triggers more flowers for the following season. The tallest in the Forsythia series is the Show-Off, just plain Show-Off, and that's exactly what this plant does. It gets 5 to 6 foot tall and 5 to 6 foot wide, creating a nice, tall, upright mound. Perfect as a specimen, or if you wanted to create a border of just gorgeous spring blooms, Forsythia Show-Off would certainly be showing off in that early spring garden. And as I mentioned, all of these are deer resistant. So if you're looking for something that the deer shouldn't touch, these early spring blooming Forsythia are a great shrub option. The next plant we're going to look at is actually the inkberry holly, and this is planted pretty much just for its evergreen, the evergreenness of it. And the one thing with these inkberry holly is a lot of people struggle with boxwood and boxwood blight. These are a great alternative if the boxwood in your garden are starting to not look so great. So the first one we're going to look at, the most compact here, is the strong box holly. It's hardy in zones 5 to 9, and it's very compact, only 2 to 3 foot tall and 2 to 3 foot wide. You can trim it if you want to keep that nice tight boxwood look. It definitely does handle trimming well. You can shape it into like a globe, or if you want to shape it into just like a nice wall look, however you like to do that, you certainly can. It likes to be planted in full sun to part sun areas. It does bloom late spring, and it blooms off of the old growth. So if you do trim it, you could also sacrifice your blooms. Now the blooms aren't super prolific. It's not like you're going to look at it and go, oh wow, my inkberry holly is blooming right now. But they do bloom a little bit. Also too, they are deer resistant. So if you're looking for a deer resistant option, these are a great evergreen deer resistant option that are native. Now, if you want to get the berries, we do recommend with your strong box planting a male pollinator. And a male pollinator would be the squeeze box if you'd like to produce or have berries on your plants. Typically, one male can pollinate several female as long as they're planted within close proximity of each other. The medium size is the hedge box, and hedge box is about 4 to 7 foot tall and 2 to 3 foot wide. So this one here, as you can tell, it's a taller variety, but it's more columnar in its stature. So if you're looking to create some nice pillars of evergreen, hedge box would be a great choice for that columnar look. Blooms off the old wood again. So really, again, I'm saying blooms off the old wood. Like I mentioned, the blooms are just not that significant, but if you are planting them for the blooms and the berries, they do happen, but really it's not something that is something you would talk about this plant like, oh yeah, this is a great flowering. It's not. It's mostly grown just for the evergreen foliage on it. Again, it's deer resistant, so don't need to worry about the deer doing some pruning on your plants for you. You're in charge of pruning should that be something that you want to do. So there's just two that I chose for the Inkberry series, a small one being Strongbox, and then that tall columnar one being Hedgebox. The next plant type we're going to look at are the hardy hydrangeas. I feel like, you've got to talk about hydrangeas whenever you're talking about shrubs. Hydrangeas actually are one of the most popular shrubs that we sell here at Garden Crossings. And I think nearly every gardener has some sort of hydrangea, I feel like, in their garden. So there's a lot of tall hydrangeas out there, and they're gorgeous. But we understand not everybody has the space for a tall hydrangea. So let's take a look at some shorter options that may be more manageable for your patios, for your containers, or your rooftop gardens. We're going to start off with one of my personal favorites, and that is the Firelight Tidbit. Firelight Tidbit was introduced just a few years ago and has quickly become a favorite of ours here at Garden Crossings. Hardy in zones 3 to 9, so it's got a really good cold hardiness. But for those of you also in the warm climates, they'll grow great for you as well. It only gets 2 to 3 foot tall and 2 to 3 foot wide. So like I said, very compact. But even though it's compact, it still has a massive, massive show of flowers that usually start around July or August and then bloom into the fall. Now, for those of us here in cooler climates, we're in Michigan, a zone 6A, we do start to get cooler at night, mid to late summer. So our flowers will go from white to a really gorgeous magenta pink. Now, for those of you in the south, you're not going to get those cool nights like we get here in the north. So you may not notice your transition going from white to pink. Yours may go from white to brown. So I do want to point that out because I know a lot of our southern friends are like, I never get the gorgeous pink colors, that I talk about here up in the north. And that is just due to your warmer climate. Lucky for you in the winter, but I guess lucky for us here in the summer. They like to be planted in full to part sun locations. So usually as long as they're getting about 6 or so hours of sun, they should bloom beautifully for you. They do bloom off the new growth. So if you do need to do any trimming or if you want to remove those spent blooms in the fall, you can trim them off in the fall or you can trim them off in the spring. I know some people will leave the blooms on just because they like how they look in the winter. So really it's a preference for you as to when it is that you would want to trim your hydrangeas. A medium-sized option is the Little Lime Punch. And this one too has done fantastic here in the landscapes at Garden Crossings. It's 3 to 5 foot tall. So once it's mature, it'll be about 5. For us in our landscape, we've had it in there for, I think we're going on year 3, maybe 4, and ours are only about 3 foot tall right now. Now we know as they continue to put on more years of growth, they will get taller, but 5 foot is where they should usually max out, especially if you are in zone 6 or 5. So they do like to be planted in full sun to part sun locations. And they're also a plant that if you're in a hot spot or if you're having a hot summer, we do recommend that you give them adequate water. The adequate water is just going to help keep the flowers looking fresher longer. So are they deer resistant? I know some of you are thinking these are a great plant. Are they deer resistant? They're not deer resistant. Typically, this is not going to be the first go-to plant the deer are going to just head right to in your garden. They're going to go after your hostas and such, or your daylilies. But we do notice that the deer do browse on the flowers in our garden. So if deer do happen to be a problem for you where you're at, again, it may not be the best choice for a garden that's invaded with a deer. Now, the tallest that we're going to talk about in the Hardy Hydrangea series is the Pinky Winky Prime. So Pinky Winky Prime gets 6 to 8 foot tall. So this is going to be one of the bigger plants in your garden. And it likes to bloom in full sun to part sun locations, as do all of the Hardy Hydrangeas. It also blooms off of the new growth. So if you do find you want to trim this one back because it does get tall, you can do so in the fall or in the spring, and you're not going to have to worry about sacrificing your blooms. The Hardy Hydrangeas, I think, are one of the most forgiving in the hydrangea class because they're tough as nails. They're easy to grow. They're very forgiving if you trim them at the wrong time, which really there isn't a wrong time unless, of course, you're seeing buds and you're trimming them off. Well, then you're going to delay the blooms. But they're very cold hardy and very forgiving if you happen to trim them when maybe you didn't think you were supposed to. And with two more plant species to go, the next one and the second to last is the rose family. So with roses, there are shorter roses and there are taller roses. So let's break it down and tell you some of the shorter varieties and some of the taller varieties, depending on how tall you want roses to get in your garden. The first one we're going to look at is the reminiscent series. So reminiscent coral. Reminiscent coral is hardy in zones 4 to 9, and it's very compact, only about 2.5, maybe 3 foot tall by 2.5 to 3 foot wide. It loves to be grown in full sun, and it will bloom usually here in Michigan. We'll start seeing some of our first blooms around the end of June, mid to end of June, and then it will bloom until later on in the summer. You can deadhead them, so as the blooms start to go away and the petals all fall, sometimes what I'll do is I'll just go in and kind of remove those spent blooms, let new growth happen, and then get some fresh new flowers. Now, you don't have to trim them. They'll still continue to rebloom for you. But I find that it seems like it's a little bit cleaner if I can trim the old rose blooms off. And I also feel like I get more flowers if I do that as well. They do bloom off of the new growth, so they could be trimmed in the fall or in the spring whenever you're doing your trimming. And as mentioned, you can remove any of those spent blooms throughout the summer as well, and it'll continue to put on that new growth with additional blooms. So roses are not a deer-resistant shrub. Typically what they'll do is, you think maybe, right, because of the thorns and such, but what they'll do is they'll go after the flowers. They're going after the most beautiful part of the plant. So typically if deer are in your garden, that is something that they may go after. One thing too is there's a lot of people that are planting in clay soil, and roses are a plant, as well as many of the others we've talked about today, that do thrive and survive in clay soil settings. A medium-sized rose we're going to look at is the Oh So Easy Double Red. Now, what does Oh So Easy stand for? What does that mean? What is that series all about? As with all of the roses in the Proven Winner collection, they've all been bred for excellent disease resistance. So they're put through some of the harshest trialing environments ever. Like they're getting watered at all the wrong time. They're jammed in close. There's not a lot of airflow. So they are definitely getting put through the ringer to find the roses with the best disease resistant. And the roses that are on the market today with Proven Winners are the ones that have made the cut and show that excellent disease resistance. So Oh So Easy Double Red is hardy in zones 4 to 9, and it gets 3 to 4 foot tall and 3 to 4 foot wide. If you're familiar with Knockout Red Rose, this is a lot like the Knockout Red, but a much, much better plant. It likes to be grown in full sun, and it will bloom like early spring or early summer actually through the fall. And like the reminiscent roses, once it's done or you feel like it's kind of done blooming, you can cut off all those old spent blooms. It'll put on new growth. It's already probably in the process of putting on new buds for new blooms. It's just one of those shrubs that just continues to bloom continuously throughout the summer. And the tallest in the rose series is the Rise Up Lilac Days. Wow, this shrub, we have it in our trial garden, and it put on the most fantastic show of color like I literally have ever seen out of any of the roses that we have on trial out in our gardens. It's hardy in zones 4 to 9. It gets about 5 to 8 foot tall, so it's definitely a taller rose, as the name implies, rise up. They're a climbing rose. And it gets about 2 to 4 foot wide. So you definitely want to grow this on an arbor or a trellis or something that can support this plant, because otherwise it'll just kind of, go up and kind of flop over. Or if you give it something to grow up, it'll rise up to the occasion, and it will put on just the most magnificent show of color ever. It likes to be planted in full sun. And when we saw the most blooms on it, it was around mid-June or so. That's when it put on its just like praiseworthy show of color. Now, it did continue to bloom throughout the summer as well, but that June color was something that was just absolutely breathtaking. And it was fragrant as well. Now, with the Rise Up Lilac Days, because the flowers are not so compact with petals, I mean, it's more of an open-faced rose. This is a rose that you will see pollinators on. And that's true, like when you're looking for roses, if you're looking for roses for the pollinators, they're going to be roses that have lesser of the petal count. They're going to be more of those open-faced roses because the pollinators have to be able to get into the pollen. Where a lot of roses have lots of petals and they're really nice and full, those roses are harder for the pollinators to get into and typically wouldn't be classified as a great pollinator plant. So if you are looking for roses that you're also looking to kind of do that double duty of attracting pollinators, it will be those roses that have less petals and are more open-faced. And the last series of shrubs we're going to look at here in our small, medium, and large series is the Weigela. So there are so many different Weigela out there right now, and I think that's the beautiful thing with this plant. There's foliage color options, there's flower color options, there's rebloomers, and there's Weigela for any size garden. So the most compact in the series that we're going to look at is the Midnight Sun. I love the foliage of Midnight Sun. It's got kind of that coppery orangey coloration going on, maybe a little bit of burgundy. It's a really unique coloration and it's very compact. Only gets about 1.5 foot tall and 1.5 foot wide. So if you're looking for a shrub that's just very small, low growing, maybe the perfect size shrub for a container or for a border, Midnight Sun with its pink tubular blooms is a great small size option. The Weigela we're going to look at today, they're all hardy in zones 4 to 8. So depending on where you live, they're pretty cold hardy. And for most of us, they're going to hit the range of the United States, except for maybe a few of you that are in like a zone 9 or such. But 4 to 8 is a pretty good zone spectrum for the majority of us, I think, that are probably watching today. Weigela do like to be grown in full sun. The more sun they have, actually, the more intense or the better coloration the foliage will have, especially with this Midnight Sun. If you were to plant it in more of a part shade area where it's not getting a lot of sun, you're just not going to see the richness and color of that foliage. Usually they'll bloom late spring, early summer, especially for us here in West Michigan. And the Midnight Sun variety blooms off of the old growth. So again, it's very compact. You shouldn't have to do any trimming on this plant. But if you feel like you do want to do some trimming, you would do so after it's done blooming. But with it only getting 1.5 foot tall and wide, probably trimming would never have to happen on here. The other thing too is Weigela are deer and rabbit resistant. So even the smallest critters that can be a nuisance in the garden, they will stay away here from these Weigela. The next one, and the medium-sized one, is the Sonic Bloom Punch. Now, the thing I like about the Sonic Bloom series is they are a re-blooming Weigela. So a lot of Weigela bloom just in the spring. They bloom in the spring, and you enjoy their foliage for the rest of the summer, which is great, right? But if you can have a shrub that will rebloom, it is one of the best reblooming that I have seen this far. When it is blooming, those gorgeous pink blooms are just amazing. So they do attract hummingbirds. Anything with that tubular type flower is definitely usually a good indicator that the hummingbirds will come visit it. Also pollinators as well. And again, as I mentioned, deer resistant. So if you're looking for a shrub that blooms multiple times throughout the summer that's deer resistant, this Sonic Bloom Punch is an excellent choice. And the last one we're going to talk about today is the Weigela Wine and Spirits. So Wine and Spirits gets about 3 to 5 foot tall. So 5 foot being kind of the tallest of the Weigela that we're currently carrying. 5 foot tall, 5 foot wide. And Wine and Spirits is kind of unlike any of the others. And the reason why is it's got really dark foliage and it has white tubular blooms. So definitely a different look. I think a lot of times when you think of the Weigela, you're thinking of, green foliage, pink flowers, but having the dark foliage with the white flowers is just a beautiful contrast of color. full sun, and that's what's going to get you that nice deep dark foliage. It does bloom in May to June, and when it's done blooming, it's pretty much done blooming. So that's where having that nice dark foliage is an added bonus, because it will continue to give you color throughout the summer in the form of foliage. So I think that, when you're looking at shrubs, if they got the flower, but they also have interesting foliage, that is where it's a plant that's doing multiple things in the garden for you throughout the season. And again, as I mentioned, deer resistant. So a great option, especially if the deer tend to visit your garden. Hopefully this video has given you a few ideas of small, medium, and large options if you're looking to add shrubs into your garden. I tried to do a good mix of flowering and evergreen and or foliage shrubs. So if you've got just a small patio, or if you have a container you're looking to plant up, or if you've got a bigger landscape that you're looking to put some bigger specimens in, or maybe you have a big landscape and you want to do more of a tiered look, we've got options for you. If there was anything that you saw in today's video that you have questions on, we're going to put links down in the description so you can head to our website and get all the information you may need on these plants. If there's anything you want to add to your garden, we are a mail order company, so we do ship all over the United States. We can ship these directly to your door. We ship usually April through the beginning of November. So you can get your pre-orders in if it's pre-order season, or if we're in the shipping season, we'll usually get them shipped to you within a week. Thanks for watching. I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings.